Chapter 379, A Strange Poison. This little sister's body is of no concern anymore, and my experience this time was extremely embarrassing. After entering Skybearing for a few days, I was ambushed by the Yu family. Shui Qian reconsidered for a moment, and for some reason, she lied to her brother. The two Yu elders, Yu Zanfeng and Yu Zanyun, led the elites of their Yu family in an ambush against me. This little sister was caught off guard and suffered a huge loss. All of my troops were wiped out, and this little sister is still injured at the moment. Both the elders also died in battle in order to save my life. This little sister and dear managed to escape at the very end and were recuperating. The Yu family again. Yu Zanfeng. Yu Zanyun. Shui Qianhuan gnashed his teeth as his face turned red. These two old fogies actually dared to harm my sister. I will definitely rip them to shreds and ensure that they die a miserable death. Thinking about how his loss was caused by the Yu family who controlled Han Taijuan, Shui Qianhuan was overwhelmed by hatred as he cursed vehemently. All of their plans were ruined in the hands of the Yu family. Unforgivable. They are also already dead. Even though the two elders passed on, they dragged the two Yu elders alongside them into death. This was also how dear and I managed to escape. Shui Qian lowered her head and did not dare to match her brother's gaze. Brother, what should we do now? I heard that your affairs weren't successful either, and this little sister was extremely worried about you. It wasn't just unsuccessful. Shui Qianhuan sighed. The 8 elders following me all perished at the hands of Ling Tian, and of the 35 experts under me, only 21 of them are left. The 400,000 soldiers of Northern Wei were all lost in the battle as well. This loss was far too miserable, and there isn't a chance for us to turn the situation around anymore. Ah! Shui Qian gasped in shock. While she knew that Ling Tian's side was victorious, she never imagined the victory to be such a thorough one. Seeing her brother's despondent appearance, she could not help but feel her heart ache as she comforted, "Brother, losing and winning are common in war, and you do not have to brood over your loss. As for not being able to turn the situation around, Northern Wei is only a chess piece of ours, and their sacrifice will not affect the general situation." Upon hearing that, Shui Qianhuan was jolted awake from his depression as he laughed. "I was only lamenting my loss, but I will never be caught up in it. If not for the sudden interference of the Yu family in this battle, no matter how amazing Ling Tian is, he would only be able to retreat in defeat. However, Ling Tian is indeed the greatest opponent of my life." As he said that, Shui Qianhuan showed traces of gloating. "What a pity, what a pity! What a pity!" Shui Qian asked with doubt, "Brother, why are you smiling in such an odd manner?" "It is a pity that Ling Tian is dead for sure. Or perhaps, he may already be dead right now." As Shui Qianhuan said that, he didn't know how to feel. It was as though he felt a trace of pity, a trace of joy, and even a trace of sadness and regret. If not, we could have joined hands with Ling Tian to deal with the Yu family. Ling Tian's death is certain? Ling Tian may already be dead? Shui Qian stood up with her lips trembling from the shock as her face turned pale. "Why? How can this be possible? Ruer, you are still unaware of it?" Shui Qianhuan looked at his sister with bewilderment. "That Wei Qingping went crazy and actually used the martial order medallion to kill Ling Tian. Ling Tian already escaped for his life, but I believe that in the face of the martial order medallion owner, he will not be able to escape for long regardless of how capable he is. Perhaps, he may be dead already, but the news hasn't spread yet." Shui Qian fell back into her chair as she stared blankly into space with bitterness in her heart. Wei Qingping, martial order medallion. The martial order medallion owner was an existence that even their Shui family wouldn't dare provoke. Why would things turn out like that? Ling Tian, can he actually escape? Would Ling Tian have any chance to survive in front of the publicly acknowledged #1 expert? Darn Wei Qingping. A long while later, Shui Qian clenched her teeth and scolded, A BSD rogue who doesn't know how to accomplish anything and only know how to screw things up. That's right. Wei Qingping does indeed deserve to die. Ruer, you are indeed right to say that he is incapable of accomplishing anything. Shui Qianhuan nodded in agreement. If he had used the martial order medallion a few days earlier, even with the interference of the Yu family, my plan would have been accomplished as well. However, he had to use the martial order medallion right when I have changed my mind and wanted to join hands with Ling Tian. What a BSD road. Even if he wanted to use it, he should have used it on Yu Manlu instead. Shui Qianhuan cursed with frustration as he followed along with his sister's anger. However, he would never know the true reason for Shui Qianru's anger at Wei Qingping. Shui Qianru hated the fact that she could not cut Wei Qingping into 1,000 pieces. Her heart, which was already focused on the escaping Ling Tian, suddenly jolted awake and she felt her face turn red. Damn it. I am not being worried about that irksome fellow. I am only worried about the poison he fed to me. Shui Qianru explained to herself in her heart. Thinking about how Ling Tian fed her poison, Shui Qianru could not help but boil with anger and say, "Serves you right." However, when she said those words, she felt her heart was empty with her thoughts in a complete mess. Ruer, sister? Shui Qianhuan cried out a few times, and seeing that his sister was in a trance-like state as though she was thinking about something, he could not help but be worried as he waved his hand in front of her face. What is wrong with you today? What are you thinking about? Why are you so distracted? Being awoken by her brother, Shui Qianru's face reddened and she felt as though her thoughts were being seen through. Thus, she could not help but lower her head in embarrassment. From the time that she was young until now, Shui Qianhuan had never seen his intellectual sister behave like this before and could not help but think that something was definitely amiss. Thus, he stretched out his hand and placed it on her forehead and with concern asked, "Ruer, are you alright? Are your injuries acting up?" "Oh, I am alright. I am really alright." Shui Qianru swatted his hand aside anxiously and muttered, "I was thinking about the poison." As she said that, she realized that she actually wasn't thinking about how Ling Tian had fed her poison, but reminiscing about her final meeting with Ling Tian. She could not help but lament about her feelings and had no choice but to admit that it was impossible for her to not think about Ling Tian. The more she thought about him, the more she felt like her heart didn't belong to her any longer. It was as though Ling Tian was an incurable poison and she had already been inflicted with that incurable poison. The tender feelings of a young lady in love were not something that she would ever talk about to another person, even if that person was her biological brother. Just when was she inflicted with this incurable poison? Shui Qianru, who was already certain that she had been inflicted with this love poison, felt a sense of helplessness. Was it when I first met him in the rain? Was it when he displayed his stunning talent during the scholarly meet? Just what is wrong with me? What? You were poisoned? Shui Qianhuan shouted anxiously. When? How long has it been? What kind of poison? Have you found the antidote yet? Haze. Silly lass, why are you always so unruly like a guy? When can you act like a gentle and virtuous lady? I have already told you to not follow me here and insisted that you listen to me if you wanted to come. Look at you, look at you. You just had to go to Sky Bearing and now. As Shui Qianhuan nagged, he grabbed Shui Qianru's wrist and injected his inner chi to check on her. He truly felt heartache towards his sister. It seems rather special. All of a sudden, his face turned solemn. What a strange poison. When did this happen? After probing for the poison, Shui Qianhuan felt extremely anxious. The poison within his sister's body could be easily detected with his inner chi, but when he tried to wrap it up with his inner chi, it would dissipate into nothingness and become impossible to detect. Just how did his sister come into contact with such a strange poison? What an odd poison. Who poisoned you? As he asked that, Shui Qianhuan shut his eyes and carefully probed the poison, attempting to use his inner chi to remove it. At the same time, his ears were perked up and waiting for a reply from his sister, but he heard nothing after a long while. Opening his eyes to see why he didn't get a reply, he was greeted with Shui Qian recovering her ears with both her hands and a miserable expression. When he turned to the side, he saw Deer covering her mouth and giggling. "What's wrong? I am asking you a question." Shui Qian Huan grew angry. Shui Qian rolled her eyes helplessly and said in a weak voice, "Sometimes, I really wonder if you are my older brother or you are a lady in disguise. When can you stop being so naggy? My goodness, mother always nags at me when I am home, and now that I am out, you nag even more than her." "You? I was only worried." "Forget it." Shui Qian Huan let out a sigh of defeat. "Do you know what kind of poison this is? Who was the one who poisoned you?" "The name of the poison is called the Spring Autumn Soul Locking Pill. I believe brother has already realized that this poison is extremely strange and almost without trace. Furthermore, the effects of the poison are also extremely overbearing, and apart from a special antidote, there is no other way to treat it. However, this poison has another characteristic and will only break out after a year, thus the name Spring Autumn. I have already suppressed the poison with other medicine, and we have a year to slowly investigate it." Shui Qianru was extremely unwilling to continue on this topic and said with a frown, "Brother, this isn't the time to talk about my body. We should be planning our next move. Do you have any ideas yet?" Chapter 380, Do You Dare Fight? Shui Qian Huan let out a sigh. "I only have a rough idea," and had already sent a message back to the family requesting reinforcements. However, the situation is extremely challenging at the present moment. The Yu family has sent out a few hundred white and purple jade experts to Skybearing and is covetously eyeing the Ling family. However, our ally the Northern Wei has already been crippled by Ling Tian, and it is impossible for them to recover from their defeat. I originally wanted to make use of the Yu family's ambitions to join hands with the Ling family, but Ling Tian is already being chased by the martial order medallion owner right now. With all our problems coming at the same time, we are in an extremely awkward predicament. We cannot make any rash moves now, and the strength the Yu family has gathered in Skybearing is too frightening. They had shifted almost half of their Yu family over to Skybearing, and the battle prowess stationed in Skybearing currently has already exceeded what they have in their headquarters. Perhaps, it can be said that Skybearing is like a second base for the Yu family in the Heavenly Star continent. If we were careless and let them pick up our trace, the consequences would be unimaginable. The things we can do right now are just far too little. As for interfering with the martial order medallion owner chasing Ling Tian, we do not have enough manpower, and it is impossible for us to influence a battle of that level. Also, Beyond Heavens is not a power that we can afford to provoke at this time. Shui Qian Huan said with worry, frustration and even a trace of helplessness. The situation in front of him was far too messy, and it was no surprise for him to be at a loss. At the same time, the Zhou family is too far away. Even if the strength of the Zhou family isn't any weaker than the Yu family, our family reminded us before we came that the Zhou family isn't too simple either. It is best that we do not provoke the Zhou family. According to our informants, the Zhou family has been acting extremely mysterious in recent years, and before we receive any instructions from the family, it is best for us to avoid them. As for the other great families, the Ximen family have already been half crippled by Ling Tian, and the elites of the Nangong family were wiped out by Ling Tian's scheme. The only two more complete families are the Dongfeng and Beiming families. However, they are too far away and wouldn't be able to solve our problem. As he made his calculations, Shui Qian Huan became shocked. This Ling Tian is amazing indeed. Have you realized that the few families that have fallen are all due to this brat's schemes? Causing wind and storms at the flip of his palm, he is truly tyrannical and difficult to deal with. The Yu family sent a huge number of troops to Skybearing? Why? Does the Yu family want to throw the world into chaos and unite Heavenly Star? Shui Qian asked with doubt. Apart from recuperating in the past few days, she rarely left her room. With only Deer by her side, it was impossible for her to find out what had happened on the outside recently. However, it seemed as though the Yu family had actually sent out a huge number of troops under the guise of sending their dowry. Thus, she could not help but be startled as she began to think about the various possibilities. We must not let the Yu family do as they wish. It would be the best if we can drive a wedge between them and cause the marriage to be annulled. As she thought about that, Shui Qianru could not help but turn slightly pinkish as she asked herself, am I thinking about my family or do I only want to ruin their wedding? No. I am definitely thinking about my family. Why would I care about that BSD road? After thinking for a long while, Shui Qianru finally said, however, our strength in sky-bearing is too weak, and the Ling family does not have Ling Tian to make decisions within the family. The Yu family would definitely think that the Ling family was already at their mercy, and we can make use of this point to turn the situation around. If we are able to turn this situation around and grasp the Ling family in our hands, we would receive the greatest benefit. As Shui Qianhuan heard that, his eyes lit up and just when he was about to say something, a white light flashed in front of his eyes and a dagger was shot through the window, landing on the table between the both of them. Shui Qianhuan immediately blew out the oil lamp in front of them and they both immediately ducked into the corner of the room without hesitation. The next moment, the room was filled with darkness with only the moonlight shining into the room. Being in the darkness, not knowing who their opponent was and how many people they were facing, it would be a rash move for the both of them to leave the room. The best option would be for them to remain calm and observe the situation first. Both the siblings had the same thought as they held their breath and hid in the shadows. Even Deer by their side also knew what to do and hid behind a clothes rack. A while later, a cold mocking tone sounded, in the middle of the night with both of you seated beside the window. If I really wanted to kill you, at least one of you would be dead by now. To think that you are not coming out to welcome us now. Water of heavenly wind, he, you are indeed the #1 family in the heavenly wind continent. Your courage makes me gasp in admiration. Hearing this, the faces of both the siblings were flushed red. Shui Qianru then responded with a cold grunt, in the middle of the night, hiding on top the roof and acting in such a sneaky manner. You only know how to catch us with our guard down. However, brother's movement technique does make me gasp in admiration. A chilly laugh sounded from the outside and the sound of fluttering clothes could be heard. Following that, a soft knocking sound could be heard on the door and the voice asked, I hope that you will forgive this uninvited guest for his sudden visit. As he said that, he did not wait for a response and the doors were swung open. A white figure could be seen standing outside with his frosty eyes looking like the stars in the night sky, gleaming in the darkness. Since Shui Qianru said that he was acting sneakily, he walked right out into the open. A small flame was lit, and then Shui Qianru lit the oil lamp. A noble guest has come to visit and I hope you will forgive us for not going out to welcome you. The guy chuckled and walked right into the room without a trace of fear on his face. It was as though he was walking into his own house and was extremely carefree. The three of them in the room looked over to see a refined young man who looked like he was only 18 to 19 years old. While he had an elegant appearance, a chilly aura emanated from his body. It's you. Shui Qianhuan stood up warily as he recognized the intruder. Taking a step forward, he stood in front of his sister, using his body as a shield. The young man in front of them was someone who he had seen on the battlefield. At that time, he was right behind Ling Tian and when his Shui family elder tried to block this young man, the elder was killed in just a few moves. How could Shui Qianhuan ever forget who this young man was? The martial arts of this young man were something that shouldn't be underestimated. I am Ling Qi, and everyone calls me the Ling Qi who slices an opponent into 1,000 pieces. Ling Qi said calmly with a trace of pride in his eyes. Back then, His young noble had once said that the cruelest punishment on earth would be to slice up the offender into 1,000 pieces. From then on, everyone had been teasing him about his name, but Ling Tian was not angry at all but enjoyed it instead. It was only because that was the name his young noble had given to him. At the same time, his young noble had also said that if anyone were to provoke him, it would be his job to slice that person into 1,000 pieces. What a majestic name! Of course, it was also a name that disgusted many others. Ling Qi? You are one of Ling Tian's underling? Shui Qian'er had also seen Ling Qi before. Back at the Smoky Thea Tower, it was Ling Qi who had barged into their chamber and fell onto their table. Shui Qian'er's memory was extremely good, and she obviously knew that Ling Kai's appearance was Ling Tian's doing. At the same time, she had also taken note of this individual who had created trouble back then. However, Ling Qi acted like a clown back then and definitely didn't have the elegance he displayed today. Although she knew that Ling Qi was related to Ling Tian, she didn't know what their relationship was. Shui Qian'er didn't suspect Ling Kai's identity and she pushed aside her brother in front of her. I am naturally my young noble's servant. Ling Qi said with respect in his eyes and pride on his face. HMPH, to think that you can be so proud of being a servant. You were really born to be a servant. Off to the side, Deer popped out and looked at Ling Qi with anger. Back then, when Ling Qi had slammed onto the table, he had sent all the dishes and soup flying in all directions. While the other martial arts experts were able to avoid the mess, Deer wasn't able to do so and was completely soiled. Thus, she naturally hated Ling Qi and had not put down her grudge even up to now. However, Ling Qi ignored her completely and asked the two Shui siblings, "My big sister sent me here to ask young noble Shui and Miss Shui a question. The Yu family is in Skybearing now, does the Shui family dare to fight them? Who is your big sister? How can we believe you?" Shui Qian'er frowned as she thought about the white-dressed lady who was always behind Ling Tian. Is your big sister Ling Chen? Ling Qi smiled and said calmly, "My big sister said that if the both of you are sincere, we will await your arrival at the Ling family courtyard at noon tomorrow. I will be taking my leave." Ling Qi cupped his fists and walked out. Oi! Stop there! Deer jumped in exasperation. The moment she said that, Ling Kai's originally slow pace sped up and he disappeared completely. Should they go or not? This was definitely an important choice. Especially during such a sensitive period. However, both the Shui siblings were extremely wise individuals and made their decision after a short discussion. While this was an important choice, there wasn't much of a point for them to discuss too much about it. Or perhaps, there wasn't even a need for them to have any discussion as they did not have any other choices. If they could join hands with the Ling family to ruin the Yu family's plans and perhaps injure them along the way, both Shui Qianhuan and Shui Qian'er would be extremely glad to make that choice. Without a doubt, there wasn't a more suitable partner for them to form an alliance with. Even if Shui Qianhuan were to ignore the 1,000-year-old grudge between their families, he felt that all of his failures in Heavenly Star was due to the Yu family controlling the scenes from behind. He already wanted to give the Yu family a good blow to vent his pent-up anger. As for Shui Qian'er's thoughts, they were even more complicated than her brother's. The only thing the both of them couldn't be certain about was just which family should take the lead in the alliance. Chapter 381, Master and Guest Changing Place. Originally, with Ling Tian's strength and the fact that the both of them were not in their territory, the leader of their alliance was already set in stone. It was useless for them to deny that. But at such a delicate moment, an unexpected incident occurred, and would the Ling family without Ling Tian be able to have sufficient strength to form an alliance with them? Furthermore, would the Yu family be their only opponent? Would there be other powers attacking the Ling family when they were down? This was something that they had to guard against. For such a complicated matter, it was impossible for it to be settled with a single statement, and a meeting between both parties was important. Thus, both Shui Qianhuan and Shui Qian'er had no choice but to accept the meeting even if there were risks involved. The next morning, Shui Qian'er and Shui Qianhuan left the city like a young noble and young miss going out for a vacation. In the scorching hot sun, they sat in a tightly sealed carriage and went out of the southern gates with their 10+ followers. In front of them was a large willow forest swaying gently in the winds. After passing through this willow forest, they would be at the Ling family courtyard. As soon as they had left the city, both the Shui siblings immediately exited the sweltering hot carriage. "Ruer, do you think that this Ling Tian is really just Ling Tian's maid? Don't you think that it is too incredulous?" While he had heard Shui Qian'er talk about her, Shui Qianhuan still couldn't believe it. He had never seen Ling Tian before and did not believe that a maid would be able to grasp such a huge amount of authority. Furthermore, she was actually able to command an expert like Ling Qi despite Ling Tian's absence. Shui Qian'er let out a sigh as she rubbed her head helplessly. "Brother, you have already asked me this question umpteen times. Yes, she is indeed Ling Tian's maid, but it is very likely that she is also his concubine. That's all." As she said that words, Ling Tian's concubine, Shui Qian'er's teeth were clenched tight and she naturally didn't forget to add, "All guys are indeed BSTRDS." Shui Qianhuan rolled his eyes and said, "My dear sister, you have already said this 3 times. Your brother is also a man. How can you talk about your older brother like that? Would I say that if you didn't ask? Do you think I want to talk about it?" Shui Qian'er said with a depressed look. "Both the Shui siblings are indeed trustworthy." A white figure suddenly appeared in front of the forest. It was Ling Qi. "My big sis is already waiting in the forest. Oh, since there are so many of you, it is best that some of you stay outside. After all, my big sis is a lady, and she will easily feel shy." As Ling Qi said that, the members of the Shui family rolled their eyes in unison as they thought, "It is not as though we don't know the rules. If you don't want to let us in to hear the contents of the meeting, you can just say it openly and we will definitely oblige. Why do you need to come up with such a ridiculous reason?" Shui Qian'er smiled and gave a few instructions before following Shui Qianhuan in with Ling Qi. If the other party wanted to deal with them, it definitely wasn't anything difficult for the other party to do so. Since the other party didn't attack them despite having such a good opportunity yesterday, it was highly unlikely for them to do so today. Thus, Shui Qianhuan didn't have any worries about their safety at all. The moment they entered the forest, Shui Qianhuan felt his soul shake and his mouth become dry. In the huge clearing of the forest, a white-dressed beauty stood there silently. Her face was filled with a cold sacred perfection and a frosty aura emanated from her body. In front of her elegance, even the afternoon sun had lost its splendor. What an outstanding beauty! There was actually only Ling Tian alone. In front of her, there were 2 bamboo chairs with white cushions on them. "Ling Tian, it is indeed you." Shui Qian'er's face turned red as she thought about how this lady was always watching when Ling Tian dealt with her. At the same time, she could not help but feel a strange feeling of defeat in her heart. "Ms. Shui, young noble Shui, it is my honor." Ling Tian said calmly, "Please, take a seat." She then flicked her sleeves and took a seat first. She had obviously treated herself as the host. "Nice to meet you." Shui Qianhuan stuttered with his intoxicated gaze fixed on Ling Tian's beautiful face. As a member of the Shui family, he should not have lost his composure completely with the upbringing he had. However, Ling Tian's appearance was just too outstanding and mesmerizing. Her appearance was outstanding to the point it was difficult to describe with words and impossible to replicate in a painting. Shui Qian'er was both embarrassed and angry as she pinched her brother's waist. "You are the young noble of water of heavenly wind. Haven't you seen pretty girls before? Why are you being intoxicated by beauty at such a critical moment? Too disappointing. After staring at a beauty like your younger sister every day, don't you have any form of resistance to pretty girls?" It definitely wasn't that Shui Qianhuan hadn't seen beauties before, and he did indeed have a strong resistance towards ordinary beauties. However, a beauty like Ling Tian was extremely rare. While a beauty like Ling Tian was rare, they weren't non-existent. With Shui Qianhuan's status, he naturally had seen a few of such beauties before. In fact, his own sister, Shui Qianhui, was a beauty at the same level as Ling Tian. Thus, it was naturally rare for Shui Qianhuan to lose his composure in front of a beauty. But no matter how many beauties he had seen before, including his sister, there wasn't a single one of them who had the natural charisma that Ling Tian had displayed. She was like a lotus in the clear waters, a beauty who was carved by nature. This was the result of Ling Tian's special grooming. He perfectly combined the independence of a 21st century lady with the gentleness of a lady in this generation. Apart from when she was in front of Ling Tian, the arrogance, indifference, elegance, and confidence given out by her melded together perfectly into a complete picture. Her exquisite features and gentle curves gave off an independence that rejected one from 1,000 miles away. The divine ice formula that she cultivated gave her a chilly and almost threatening atmosphere. However, the most eye-catching part about Ling Tian was her fairy-like demeanor and sacred, inviolable elegance. Especially the fact that she was worrying about Ling Tian presently, her brows furrowed slightly with a trace of sorrow. Such a beauty was more than capable of capturing any man's soul. She could definitely make a man go crazy for her. Even if Shui Qianhuan was extraordinary, he was no exception. Even a proud individual like Shui Qianhuan was completely entranced by Ling Tian's country-toppling beauty. Feeling Shui Qianhuan's rude gaze, Ling Tian's brows wrinkled slightly. Despite not making any special actions, one could clearly see that she had hated someone to stare at her like that. Almost instantly, Shui Qianhuan lowered his head as he felt a sense of disappointment in his heart. At this moment, he could clearly feel that this beauty in front of his eyes had completely disregarded his presence. Perhaps, it could even be said that she had hated him completely. However, Shui Qianhuan wouldn't question Ling Tian but only lament to himself for being so rude and making the beauty in front of him disappointed. I invited the both of you here today to ask a single question. The Yu family has stationed themselves in Skybearing, and I wonder if the Shui family has any plans? Ling Tian said in an unhurried manner. Hearing the beauty's voice, Shui Qianhuan raised his head up swiftly, but being trapped in remorse for his actions, was unable to react. Shui Qianhuan snickered and asked, Ms. Chen, the Yu family has stationed themselves in Skybearing and is eyeing covetously on the Ling family. I wonder what the Ling family's plans are? Ling Tian responded with a calm smile, how can our Ling family have any plans? Before his departure, the young noble said that while our Ling family may seem glorious in the past few years, we do not have deep foundations after all. Thus, it would be impossible for us to be compared to thousand-year-old families like the Yu or Shui family. In fact, we wouldn't even have the strength to consider fighting them. The only choice we have would be to protect our family members. This would depend on what attitude the Shui family has towards us. It was as though she was talking about something irrelevant to herself. If the Shui family can give us conditions which are attractive enough, we would naturally choose the Shui family. After all, the actions of the Yu family have made us feel extremely uncomfortable. If the Shui family cannot satisfy our Ling family, we would naturally pick the Yu family. With Sister Bing Yan and Third Master Yu around, I believe that the lives of our Ling family members wouldn't be too horrible. With the world watching them, I believe that the Yu family wouldn't make things difficult for our Ling family if we were to submit to them. As Ling Tian said that, Shui Qianhuan and Shui Qianhui were both dumbfounded. Only at this moment did Shui Qianhuan finally walk out from his entranced state. After hearing what Ling Tian had said, he felt as though his thoughts were thrown into a mess. At this moment, both the siblings realized that things were completely different from how they had envisioned it to be. They originally thought that without Ling Tian being present, the Ling family would have lost an important pillar. Facing the pressure of the Yu family, they would definitely be extremely flustered and anxious. If their Shui family were to offer an alliance at such a moment, the Ling family would definitely feel gratitude and everything else would flow smoothly after. After that, the position of the master and guest would change and they would be able to do whatever they wanted to. Both of them felt that since Ling Tian was the one who initiated this meeting, they would definitely have the upper hand and initiative. Ling Tian would definitely be the one asking for a cooperation, and the benefits would all be in their hands. But right when they had just met, Ling Tian had used a few sentences to truly cause the position of the master and guest to change. The initiative was held completely in Ling Tian's hands. Chapter 382, Bitter Negotiation. But at this moment, they had no choice but to fight back. Even without Ling Tian's presence, the strength of the Ling family was not something to be underestimated. Just the two people in front of them, Ling Tian and Ling Qi, were not weaker than the two of them. Furthermore, the Ling family still had the huge Ling family courtyard behind them, and it was definitely brimming with talents within. If such a powerful force were to submit to the Yu family, then the conclusion of the fight between both the Yu and Shui family was without question. The Shui family, who was already on the losing end at this moment, wouldn't have any hope to win. The disparity between both the families at that time would be far too great. Now that the siblings had the chance to succeed and prevent something like that from happening, if they were to let this opportunity slip away and cause their family to be on the losing end or even worse, then they would definitely become the sinners of the Shui family for the next 1,000 years. However, if they were to allow Ling Tian to continue to have the upper hand and do as she wished, wouldn't they end up suffering a huge loss? How could they let Ling Tian climb on their heads and do as she wished? How could they allow Ling Tian to extort them as she pleased? In that instant, both Shui Qian'er and Shui Qianhuan were filled with a strong fighting spirit. Ever since she was born, Shui Qian'er felt that she was a wise individual and had never suffered any losses. The only time she suffered a loss was in Ling Tian's hands. However, she had only lost to Ling Tian before, and he was still the guy who she had feelings towards. Losing in Ling Tian's hands was something that she was still willing to accept. But now that she was facing Ling Tian, Shui Qian'er suddenly felt as though she wasn't having a negotiation at all. It was as though she was a lamb who didn't have a choice but to be slaughtered. At the same time, she felt as though the person seated in front of her was the hateful Ling Tian. The Ling Tian who she was hopeless against. Such a feeling made her extremely depressed. She felt as though she had the strength but was unable to display it. She felt as though her thoughts were being completely seen through, and such a horrid feeling was something she was extremely familiar with. It was really like master like servant. Shui Qian'er was speechless. She would still be able to accept it if Ling Tian was the only one who was so outstanding. However, there was now another with Ling Tian. The feeling of helplessness all over again. The same crafty plans that were so difficult to deal with. I wonder what Miss Ling has planned? I do not believe that with Mrs. Intellect, you will be willing to submit to others. Since there isn't any outsider at the moment and we have the intention to cooperate, everything can be discussed. There isn't a need to be so absolute. Shui Qianhuan laughed dryly. He no longer dared to look down on the lady in front of him and already treated her as a worthy opponent. I would like to know how much strength the Shui family has in the Heavenly Star continent at this moment. Where are they distributed at? When would the experts of the Shui family be able to arrive at Sky Bearing? Both of you should know that without the aid of the Shui family experts, even if we were to join hands, there wouldn't be a way of dealing with the Yu family's attack. Ling Tian looked at Shui Qian'er and ignored Shui Qianhuan completely. Shui Qian'er snickered. Miss Chen must be kidding. Such things could have been said originally, and honesty would lay the foundations for our cooperation. However, isn't Miss Chen's question about our Shui family's strength in Heavenly Star a little too unreasonable? Would Miss Chen tell me about the distribution of your Ling family's strength if I were to ask? A sparkle could be seen in Ling Tian's eyes as she said, "Well said, Miss Shui. Honesty would indeed lay the foundations for our cooperation, but the strength of my Ling family is the foundation for us to preserve our lives. Both the Shui and the Yu families are existences that we have to be wary of and guard against. Even if I were to conceal the strength of my Ling family, it wouldn't be anything in the eyes of both your families. However, the number of troops the Shui family can muster in this fight is the basis of our cooperation. With Ms. Shui's intellect, you would definitely understand that, right? If the Shui family cannot give us enough assurance, then it wouldn't matter if we don't cooperate." Shui Qianru was once again shocked by Ling Tian's forceful stand. Apart from considering the interests of her family, the reason why Shui Qianru would make such a forceful rebuttal was also because she was angry that Ling Tian was Ling Tian's ambassador. However, the question that Ling Tian had asked was something that she could not answer at the moment. She had just met up with Shui Qianhuan not too long ago and there are many things which she was still unsure about. After hearing what Ling Tian had said, she turned to look at her brother, obviously wanting to let him make the decision. As Shui Qianhuan saw both the ladies cross swords with each other, he stood by the side refusing to include himself in the fight. In his memory, his younger sister had never been on the losing end when engaging in a verbal spar with someone else. Thus, he could not help but let out a bitter laugh and rubbed his nose awkwardly. "We have just sent news back to our family, but our family would need time to arrange manpower and formulate a plan. According to my estimates, they would arrive in another 10 to 15 days. Rest assured, Miss Ling, as long as I have news from the family, I will definitely send someone to inform Miss. Our Shui family is extremely sincere to cooperate with your Ling family." Sincerity? I don't see that at all. While young noble Shui seems to be extremely honest, it is as good as saying nothing at all. While 10 to 15 days doesn't seem like much, in such a critical and delicate situation, many things can happen in this period of time. The Shui family may not be concerned about any changes because there aren't many of your Shui family members present. However, our Ling family cannot be indifferent as a small change can be earth-shaking to us. If our cooperation is going to be built upon such a foundation, then it is impossible for my Ling family to accept it. I believe young noble Shui can understand what I mean," Ling Tian said in a calm manner. Shui Qianhuan was at a loss for words. Ling Tian's words had hit the nail on the head as time was indeed a scarce resource. However, their Shui family truly didn't have any way to solve this problem. Shui Qianru then said, "Ms. Chen is being too overbearing. My elder brother has only told the truth, and this is something that we are also helpless about. Besides, Ms. Chen is already familiar with our party's strength, and we can also admit that we have hardly any more strength left in Heavenly Star. Is such sincerity insufficient? It isn't enough. Of course it isn't enough. Sincerity is the foundation of our cooperation, but without strength, there isn't even a need to talk about cooperation," Ling Tian said coldly. "This is the first time in my life I have heard someone saying that the strength of my Shui family isn't sufficient. Isn't Mrs. Words a little too much?" Shui Qianru retorted. "I am not doubting the strength of the 1,000-year-old Shui family. I am doubting the strength that both of you have displayed presently. Such a strength makes it difficult for a cooperation to go forward. Do Miss Shui and young noble Shui agree?" Ling Tian's voice was still calm. A cold glare flashed past Shui Qianru's eyes as she said, "Then what do you want? I believe you already have your plans. Why not be frank and tell us your true intention?" Ling Tian looked towards Shui Qianru and smiled. "Miss Shui, if both our families were to cooperate now, it would be to both our benefits. If we were to separate, we would only end up becoming the food of others. However, your family's strength is still insufficient for a cooperation, and it is best for you to contact your family first. Since your Shui family has the sincerity to work with our Ling family, I wonder if you can give some conditions and compensations?" I wonder what kind of conditions Miss Chen wants? Shui Qianru frowned. Since we have already decided to cooperate, then please forgive me for my frankness. Even if my family's strength is currently insufficient, the Ling family is already in peril and the situation is extremely unstable. Of course, I believe Miss Chen can see that if the Ling family supports the Yu family, our Shui family will definitely be on the losing end in the war against the Yu family in the future. For our Shui family to cooperate with the Ling family, we would not be interested in merely solving the Ling family's crisis. Cooperation is formed on the basis of mutual benefits, and if we do not have any benefits, we wouldn't be interested either. Even if the Ling family has some conditions, I hope that your conditions will not be unreasonable. If your conditions are too much, there won't be a reason for us to cooperate any longer. Shui Qianhuan beamed with joy as he heard what his sister said, almost wanting to stand up and give her an applause. Shui Qianru's words were neither servile nor overbearing and were like a needle concealed in silk floss. She had openly pointed out the reason why Ling Chen could gain the upper hand to ask for conditions and had also blocked Ling Chen from extorting their Shui family as well. It was akin to Shui Qianru saying, as long as your conditions aren't too ruthless, we can definitely cooperate. But if your so-called compensations are too much, then our Shui family would rather be destroyed than be taken advantage of. Ling Chen was taken aback for a moment and she looked at Shui Qianru with a profound smile. Ms. Shui does indeed think for your family. Such a charisma is something that Ling Chen truly admires. Shui Qianru's face turned red as she remembered how Ling Tian had mercilessly reprimanded her back then. Ling Chen was obviously making use of Ling Tian's words to ridicule her. Thus, she could not help but clench her teeth and said, the Shui and Yu families have been present for 1,000 years and have always been enemies. The Shui family may not necessarily lose to the Yu family. Furthermore, aren't Miss Chen's actions also for the Ling family? Why do you have to mock me as such? Ling Chen let out a smile as she said with a tender look in her eyes, no. Miss Shui is wrong. I am not doing this for the Ling family. I am only doing this for a single person. I will live for him and die for him only. Even if I have to die 100 times for him, I will have no regrets. I will endure all hardships for him gladly. This is also the greatest happiness a lady could have. Ling Chen then paused for a moment before continuing, besides, the young noble is already in a precarious situation and there is no one in this world who can save him. To me, my young noble's safety is the most important, and I will ensure that my young noble can deal with the martial order medallion owner without any worries. Presently, supporting the Yu family can ensure decades of safety for our Ling family, as it is impossible for them to kill one of their supporters. To the Yu family, a Ling family without Ling Tian only has benefits and does not have any risks. But to consider for the young noble's plans in the future, I cannot submit to the Yu family at this moment, and thus the meeting between the both of us today. What does Miss Shui think? Shui Qianru was at a loss for words. Ling Chen then shook her head and said, as for Miss Shui, you are completely different. How can the two of us be compared? Chapter 383, Bloody Storm. Shui Qianru's face flushed bright red before it turned snow white as her state of mind was thrown into disarray. If not for Shui Qianhuan being beside her, she would have definitely shouted back at Ling Chen, I also want to have someone like that. I also want to give my all for a single person. Am I not also a lady in love? I also understand the joy of having someone in my heart. But who would give me such a chance? Where would my chance come from? How would you understand the pain of being born in a 1,000-year-old family? If you were being brainwashed to be loyal to your family since young, you would definitely turn out like me as well. Ms. Chen, I am also someone like you. Shui Qianru suppressed the bitterness in her heart as she said, you were taken in by young noble Ling since you were young and have been brainwashed to have absolute loyalty to him. How can you be so sure that I wouldn't understand the feeling of accompanying someone in life and death? I was educated by the rules of my family since young, and those rules have long taken root in my heart and are unshakable. The only difference between us is that you are luckier than me. The young noble who you have pledged your loyalty to can become your beloved man after you grow up. Thus, you are able to give your all for your beloved with even more sincerity and passion. This is because the one who you love is also the very person you are loyal to. There aren't any conflicts. This is your luck. Your greatest luck. But what about me? A tear rolled down from Shui Qianru's face. Do I have such luck? Do I have a choice? Ling Tian went silent for a while as she said apologetically, "Please forgive me, Miss Shui, perhaps I had not placed myself in your shoes." Shui Qianru had a firm personality since she was young, and it was extremely rare for her to cry. However, she could not help but sob as she heard what Ling Tian had said. With her hands covering her face, she sobbed to the point that her body began to tremble. Why can all others choose their own happiness except for me? The first person for me to fall in love with is actually the enemy of my family and a target for me to kill. My heart is also filled with contradiction. On one hand, I had to kill him, but on the other hand, I cannot keep myself from thinking of him. For the mission to fail, while I do feel a sense of disappointment, I also felt a great sense of relief. However, the next thing I have to face is the interrogation of my beloved man and a great deal of sarcasm. In fact, he personally fed me poison. How pitiful. I am also a lady. A lady who longs for love. Why can't I gain what a normal lady has? What is the use of glory, riches, and authority in the world? Why can't the heavens be fair to me? Being overwhelmed by grief, Shui Qianru's heart collapsed as the pent-up grievances in her heart exploded forth. She burst out crying until the point she almost fainted. Thinking about how that person's life and death were unknown, she felt a stronger sense of grief in her heart, but this grief was one that she couldn't speak of to anyone and could only be vented through her tears. Ling Tian let out a gloomy sigh and stood up, hugging Shui Qianru into her embrace and gently stroked Shui Qianru's back. At this moment, there weren't any enmities or benefits, there were only two maidens' hearts. A long while later, Shui Qianru's crying slowly stopped and she lowered her head while clutching the corner of her shirt in embarrassment. Shui Qianhuan looked at his sister with tenderness before saying to Ling Tian, "Miss Ling, Ruer had already said what has to be said. I wonder what Miss Ling's plans are?" Ling Tian glanced at Shui Qianhuan coldly and said, "If that's the case, there isn't a need for us to hide anything from each other. Why don't we talk openly and be straightforward with each other? I shall be straightforward with you. We never expected any benefits from your Shui family from the start. However, we need you to ensure the safety of our Ling family. As for the fight between the Shui and Yu families, that will be none of our business outside of Sky Bearing. But in Sky Bearing, the plan to deal with the Yu family will be crafted by our Ling family, and your Shui family will have to aid us fully. For the troops being sent from the Shui family, apart from competing with time, they need to be a sizable force. If your Shui family is only going to send a few sidekicks, we will never be crazy enough to accompany you into death. All of the plans will be determined after your Shui family reinforcements arrive." After saying those words, Ling Tian looked as though she was considering something before adding on, "It isn't convenient for our Ling family to make an appearance at the moment, so we have hired the first pavilion. At that time, the first pavilion will send out a couple of top-notch assassins to work together with you. As for our Ling family, we will be in charge of the information in Sky Bearing. What does young noble Shui think about this suggestion?" Shui Qianhuan looked towards the sky as he carefully considered everything Ling Tian said. Every single condition of hers did not have any flaws, and after a long while, he said, "The only thing that this young noble thinks isn't appropriate is the Ling family being in charge of the plans to deal with the Yu family. As for all other things, there isn't a problem." A smile curved up on Ling Tian's lips before it quickly disappeared without a trace. "This can be discussed." Since this is the cooperation of both our families, we can discuss the plans after our Ling family has gathered information. How about that? Shui Qianhuan replied with a smile, that would be the best. As long as anything was to go wrong, he would be able to make adjustments quickly and prevent himself from falling into a trap. After making that decision, he could not help but look towards Ling Tian's face again, and he was yet again entranced. Ling Tian's face turned chilly as a cold glare shot out from her eyes. Young noble Shui, you have to be clear about one thing. Shui Qianhuan replied calmly, may Miss Ling instruct me? A killing intent flashed in her eyes as Ling Tian said, it is only a small matter. I hope that young noble Shui will respect himself. I already have a husband, and if young noble Shui cannot control his eyes, I will not hesitate to help dig them out for you. This is definitely not something difficult for me to do. As Ling Tian said that, a powerful killing intent gathered and pressured Shui Qianhuan from all directions. While it was formless and without substance, it filled the whole forest in that instant. Shui Qianhuan immediately felt at least 3 experts unleashing their aura on him. Each and every one of them had a cultivation superior to him. At the same time, Ling Qi, who was standing behind him, was like a cold unsheathed sword. Shui Qianhuan immediately circulated all of his inner qi to protect himself, but was still unable to withstand the pressure from a single expert. His face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood and shook unsteadily. Ms. Chen. Shui Qianhuan became flustered as she looked at Ling Chen with pleading eyes. It is normal for an individual to love beauties. Why does Miss Chen have to be offended? With a wave of her hand, peace returned to the forest as though nothing had happened. Ling Chen then smiled at Shui Qianhuan and said softly, I hope Miss Shui will forgive me. My face is only for young noble to admire. If young noble knew that someone else was staring at me, he would be angry for sure. Ling Chen smiled brightly and said in a shy manner, I can't bear to let young noble be angry on my behalf. Shui Qianhuan looked at Ling Chen blankly for a moment before sighing and saying with sincerity, Ms. Chen, I am really envious of you. A look of happiness and satisfaction could be seen on Ling Chen's face. That's right, I have my young noble and there aren't any more regrets in this lifetime of mine. So, I do truly believe that I deserve your envy. Ling Chen had already left, but Shui Qianhuan was rooted to the spot and still in a daze as Ling Chen's words resounded in her ears. That's right, I have my young noble and there aren't any more regrets in this lifetime of mine. So, I do truly believe that I deserve your envy. What about me? What do I have? With the willow forest swaying in the winds, Shui Qianhuan began to tear. Despite having the upper hand throughout the negotiations, Ling Chen was not complacent in the slightest. The moment she returned to the courtyard, she instructed for Ling Jian to find her and she ordered in a stiff manner, the time is ripe, wipe out Northern Wei. After Ling Jian had heard that, he turned solemn as a dense killing intent shot out from his body. To what extent? Ling Chen replied calmly, you can decide that on your own. My only restriction will be a time limit. I can only give you 8 days. You can arrange the relevant manpower on your own and I have only 2 requests. First, you have to complete the mission in the designated time. Second, everyone must retreat without injuries. Ling Jian replied with a confident smile, all right. I promise you. I have been waiting for this order for a long time. I will bring Feng, Yan, 19 and his brothers, a total of 7 people. All 7 of us will definitely come back safely. We will definitely turn the Northern Wei Imperial Palace into hell. We will wipe out all life in that place. It has been too long since the first pavilion last had a mission and I believe the world has begun to forget about us. Ling Jian's words were laced with a strong sense of hatred. In the past few days, as long as he talked about Northern Wei, he would be exploding with killing intent. If not for the fact that he had promised Ling Chen to wait for the right time, he definitely would have already taken action. Now, the time had finally come for him to vent his anger. This pavilion head of the first pavilion, a world-famous killer, who knows how he will shock the world this time. Ling Tian nodded his head and said, "After the mission, none of you are allowed to interfere in anything else and you must return immediately. None of you are allowed to disturb the young noble. If not, they will be kicked out of the courtyard and executed on the spot. They will never be young noble's brother anymore." Ling Tian suddenly turned around and glared at Ling Tian, her powerful gaze looking as though she could see through Ling Tian's soul. Chapter 384, Operation Begins. Ling Tian coughed out twice in embarrassment, sounding like a chicken whose neck was being wrung. His plan had been completely seen through by Ling Tian. It did not matter to him if he would be sentenced to death for breaking the rules or be cancelled off the name list of the first pavilion, but if he lost his title as a brother to the young noble, that was unacceptable. This was also the cruelest punishment for him. On that night, the doors of the Ling family courtyard silently opened, and 7 great steeds silently left the compound, each carrying a person clothed in black. The soft clopping of horse hooves broke the serenity of the night, as these 7 figures full of killing intent rushed towards the north. In the distant skies of the north, the clouds lazily drifted by, and under the light of the moon, they turned into a weird shade of red, almost like blood. After sending the specialized secret missive to Ling 30, who was also known as XiMensa, Ling Tian began to slowly walk into the Western Sky Restaurant. Western Sky Restaurant, the biggest restaurant in Celestial Gathering City and was just beside the grand and magnificent main entrance of the XiMen family. It was not yet lunchtime, so there were not many people inside the restaurant. Only a sparse scattering of tables were filled, which made the place seem even more spacious. Right now, Ling Tian's current image was similar to Yi Qingqian's fortune teller image, and he had even pasted a beard to his face. Clad in a handsome set of robes, he displayed a demeanor that looked as though he had descended from the high heavens. After asking for a seat by the window, Ling Tian leisurely took a seat, a heavy look on his face as his mind started to work. While he believed that he had temporarily put down the terror that was justice, but having accidentally caused such a big event in Celestial Gathering City, it would be bound to attract justice back here in a short while. By then, how could he resolve this matter? Was he wrong in making a move? The sound of footsteps was heard, and following that was a respectful voice saying, "Nice to meet you, young noble XiMen." After the standard greetings had been exchanged, a set of light footsteps were heard as a person walked towards Ling Tian. The footsteps sounded rushed and hurried, apparently the person was quite excited. "Mr. Young noble here has been facing some problems recently, could I beg sire to divine for me my road in the near future?" A light-hearted voice sounded from beside Ling Tian. Everyone was originally surprised as to why their youthful and pleasant little young noble XiMensa immediately walked towards the fortune teller when he came in. However, upon hearing his words, they immediately understood, how could it be just facing some problems these days? They were literally in the dumps. No wonder this young noble XiMen was leaning on spiritual support right now. In a flash, Ling 30 had already taken a seat opposite of Ling Tian, and on his handsome face there was a slight flush and a fiery excitement hidden in his eyes, full of respect and admiration. "Haha, I'm not sure, what matter would this young noble want to consult me about?" Ling Tian only indifferently laughed in response, but his eyes shot out a warning look. "This young noble would request sire to look into my life in the future. How will my luck be like? Will my house be in any danger, and would this danger be able to be solved?" While Ling 30 still looked a bit unnatural, but at least he appeared more at ease right now. "Haha, all of these are actually secretive matters. As the saying goes, the sayings of heavens cannot be revealed, and the teaching of the ways will never pass through 6 ears. Under such a large audience, how could I reveal so many things?" Ling Tian purposefully increased his volume as he smiled. Indeed, the moment he finished speaking, an attendant quickly ran over, stammering, "Young noble XiMen, How about I get you a private room to continue your conversation with this esteemed sire, would you be okay with that? Ling 30 carelessly waved his hands, completely displaying his bearing as an aristocratic child. Lead the way. After that, he turned to Ling Tian and replied, Sire, please. I wouldn't dare, young noble, please go ahead. Ling Tian smirked inwardly as it seemed like his gamble in choosing this kid had paid off. There was no hint of any of his thoughts on his expressions. He had originally thought that this kid was just a loyal follower who idolized him, but now it seemed like he was also good at acting. 30 pays respects to the young noble. The moment they entered the private room, the proud air present on his face dissipated, and with a putong sound, he kneeled on the floor, tears of joy already springing up in his eyes. He continued in a trembling voice, the moment I heard that young noble was made a target using the martial order medallion, 30 felt that every day spent here was like a year, constantly worrying about your well-being. To be able to finally see young noble today, it is a matter worth celebrating. With your miraculous ways of killing, how could a mere martial order medallion owner be able to match up against you? Come on, get up. You're already so old, why are you bawling so much for? Ling Tian smiled as he stooped down to pick him up. If anyone were to see the grand young noble's man actually kneeling like a servant, there would be unwanted gossip. How's your side so far, is everything successful? Ling 30 happily sat back down, and smiled bashfully, I just knew it, with young noble's peerless skills, the martial order medallion owner would not be able to trump over you. However, I was still extremely unsettled at heart, please forgive me. Ling Tian nodded his head, but gravely spoke, that martial order medallion owner, Justice, is extremely pedantic, and his martial skills are also at the top of the upper echelon. While I typically do not look up to anyone, but for this person, I can't help but admire and respect him. Ling 30 replied nonchalantly, but despite how high his skills are, he still cannot compare to my young noble. Ling Tian bitterly laughed, if he was just good at martial arts, do you think that I would bother running for such a long distance, and avoid clashing with him for the past 1,000 miles? If he could be dealt with using pure strength, then why would I leave sky-bearing and not just try to overwhelm him with numbers? Without a doubt, his capability is the highest I've ever seen in my entire life. We exchanged a few moves, and every time I had to use up my treasures, even gambling with my life. The last exchange we had, if I did not resort to betting my life, I definitely would not have been able to escape from his hands. Ling 30 was tongue-tied, before I met you today, I heard rumors that he was in pursuit of you, and it was such exciting gossip that almost every person in the pugilistic world was aware of it. I had merely thought it was someone deliberately spreading falsehoods, but to think that there was really such a person under the heavens. I even wanted to use the strength of Celestial Gathering City to entrap him. Thank goodness you didn't try anything. This person's strength cannot be suppressed through numbers. If you were to forcefully attempt it, you would just be sending people to their deaths. However, you don't need to worry about this currently, because he has already been lured away by one of my tricks, and I believe that he should currently be quite a distance away from the city. Alright, let's not talk about him first, explain to me about the situation here. Is everything going well? Hearing Ling Tian's question, Ling 30 perked up and bowed as he replied, everything is going as in young noble's plans, still relatively successful. After I brought the whole stack of war spoils into the Celestial Gathering City, my position was elevated, and right now, I'm the only successor in line for the head of the Ximen family. However, that being said, all matters in the family still have to go through a group of old fogies, so for the time being, we can't change the situation. Ling Tian frowned, stupid. I've spent so much effort to eliminate all those potential candidates from the direct line of descent in the Ximen family, don't tell me you still have to wait for a bunch of old men to die on their beds before you can receive the authority? Ling 30 lowered his head and spoke with grief in his tone, young noble, Actually, those weaker elders have already been eliminated by me, but there are still 4 of them that I'm not confident of with my current strength, thus. There are 4 of them. Which 4? Ling Tian's face grew heavy. Ximen Wu Yi, Ximen Sheng, Ximen Kuang, and Ximen Chongtian. These 4 have stronger martial skills than mine, and they all have their own trusted aides, thus. Ling 30 hemmed and hawed, his face turning pale with fright. Thinking about Ling Tian's anger and dissatisfaction, the stress he felt increased even further, to the point that he was literally sweating. Instead of being afraid that Ling Tian was going to punish him, he was more afraid that Ling Tian was disappointed in him. If that's the case, then I'll tell you a piece of good news: out of the 4, only 3 are left. Ling Tian indifferently spoke. Ximen Sheng died in my hands just earlier today. Ximen Kuang has an arrogant attitude, and I believe getting rid of him will not be a big matter. The main point is that Ximen Chongtian cannot die right now. We still need him in the Western Han army, curbing the strength of Han Taizhuan and indirectly the Yu family. However, as for the family head Ximen Wu Yi, it's better to leave him with a breath to struggle at death's door. If you really want to take over official control of the Ximen family, then you will definitely require some support. Thus, before you can take over the family, you must leave him barely alive. Ling Tian coldly laughed, a chilling gleam in his eyes as he said, "Give me all the information about Ximen Kuang and Ximen Wu Yi. Since I'm already here at Celestial Gathering City, then I might as well leave my mark." Before Ling 30 left, Ling Tian had indifferently commented, "After those Ximen guys get into trouble, you must, in the shortest time, create as much chaos as you can in the Western Han Empire. The bigger the better, the best would be to attract all the different countries to come and participate. This would help us with our plans in skybearing. However, your safety remains the utmost priority. This is my rule. I do not want to see years down the road that at 30 is not by my side." The 2 of them exchanged words of farewell, each leaving their separate ways. In the darkness of the night, Ling Tian borrowed the force of his movement technique to silently soar out from the window of his inn, flying like a shooting star towards the west side of the city. A cool breeze lingered on his face, and there seemed to be a hint of a fishy smell. Was it an indication that tonight going to be one full of blood and slaughter? Outside the Celestial Gathering City, the elder of the Ximen family, Ximen Kuang, had brought over 20 of his personal guards and direct line descendants and was making merry in a tent. "Elder, the family head wants us to search for the location of Ling Tian, but instead we're. Anyways, this place also isn't too far away from the city, but not exactly near either. Even if we were to search for Ling Tian, because of his need to hide from the martial order medallion owner, he would either be hiding in the deep forests or in the city. How would he be in such a location? If the Great Elder finds his traces before we do, then the gains will not make up for the losses. There has been no signal from them for the whole afternoon, so maybe they've already found Ling Tian." One of the men was slurring as he daringly spoke, possibly because of the alcohol. "Idiot." While Ximen Kuang seemed like he was scolding, his eyes had already narrowed to slits as he continued, "Let me ask you all, what do you think of the martial order medallion owner's skills? I've heard that he is the publicly acknowledged #1 person, but I'm unsure if that's the truth." The same man looked up with squinty eyes and let out a belch. If the legends are true, then half of his skill would allow one to roam the world unhindered. Chapter 385, Unprecedented. "With just you? Stop dreaming. The martial order medallion owner has a nickname, Sending Justice. While there aren't many people that he sends justice to, each and every one of them were all top-notch experts. Even if you have only 30% of his abilities, it is enough for you to be one of the top few experts in the world." Ximen Kuang picked up a roasted chicken and bit off a portion. "Let me ask you, how are Ling Tian's martial arts?" Ling Tian is, of course, an extraordinary character as well. that burly man said with a look of admiration. He was actually able to charge into the 400,000-strong Northern Wei army alone and was not injured at all. Furthermore, that number one expert has been chasing him for so long and news of his death hasn't spread yet. From this, it can be seen that even if Ling Tian is weaker than the martial order medallion owner, he shouldn't be too far off. HMPH. If that's the case, can any of us be a match for Ling Tian or the martial order medallion owner? Ximen Kuang said with a gloomy expression. Haha, elder, are you kidding? If we were to face either of them, our deaths would be certain. That burly man gave a thumbs up to Ximen Kuang. Brilliant. Elder, you are truly brilliant. This plan of yours is brilliant indeed. Letting First Elder run into a wall. Perhaps he will meet his end. Ximen Kuang stroked his beard and smiled delightedly. If we were to put an effort to search for Ling Tian's whereabouts, with the size of our Ximen family's information network, it would be impossible for us to not have a clue at all. However, have you thought about what will happen if we were to find them? That burly man trembled slightly as he sobered up a little. The moment they were to meet with those two jinxes, they would be dead for sure. Ximen Kuang snorted. Let us not talk about whether or not we can block Ling Tian first. Even if we can block him, by the time that the martial order medallion owner arrives to kill him, how many of us would be left alive at that time? If we don't meet Ling Tian but the martial order medallion owner instead, what should we do? All of their faces turned pale as beads of sweat rolled down their faces and they let out a heave of relief. They all looked at Ximen Kuang with gratitude and said, "Our lives were all saved by Elder." Ximen Kuang let out a strange laugh and said mockingly, "Only an idiot like Ximen Xing would put in all his effort to find those two jinxes. For him to not send back any news after so long, he probably met both of them already and has been buried underground." Haha. Brilliant, brilliant. Elder Ximen Kuang truly has incredible foresight, a clear voice sounded. That's right. Ximen Kuang raised his head up proudly. When this old man was roaming around the pugilistic world back then, my friends gave me a nickname, Mr. Smart. HMPH, you bunch of. As he said that, Ximen Kuang suddenly realized that something was wrong. That voice did not belong to any one of his Ximen family members. Thinking about that, Ximen Kuang could not help but be alarmed as he shouted, Who dares to make a fool out of your granddaddy Ximen?" A white flash could be seen, and a charismatic youth suddenly appeared in their tent and in front of Ximen Kuang. He looked at Ximen Kuang with a carefree and cordial smile as though he was meeting an old friend. Ximen Kuang was completely dumbfounded. This is because he realized that the oil lamp in front of him did not even sway when this white-dressed youth entered. To think that this white-dressed youth was able to enter at such a speed without bringing a single gust of air with him. What kind of a movement technique was that? How many people in the world were able to have such an exquisite movement technique? You. Friend, who are you? This old man is Ximen Kuang from the Ximen family. Ximen Kuang's face began to contort, his beard trembling as he took a few steps back. "I do not believe that the world-famous Mr. Smart will not know who I am." The white-dressed youth squinted his eyes and said with a chuckle, "Since Elder Ximen has the nickname of Mr. Smart, if you can't guess my identity, then I will be extremely disappointed." Ximen Kuang looked as though he was about to cry as he said with a hoarse and trembling voice, How would I know who this friend is?" "Oh? You don't know who I am? Really?" The white-dressed youth said with a benevolent expression, "Then you should think carefully. Think again carefully. Eh?" With your body trembling and face turning pale, it looks like you are very afraid. "How strange." The white-dressed youth turned around and said with a puzzled expression, "Since you don't know who I am, what are you afraid of?" The white-dressed youth said with a look of concern, "Ximen Kuang, do you have epilepsy?" Ximen Kuang's knees buckled as he nodded his head vigorously, "Yes. Yes. I have epilepsy. Epilepsy. Oh, no wonder. The white-dressed youth said with enlightenment, so you have epilepsy. Zai Menguang's face turned ashen as he said softly, yes, yes, yes. I have epilepsy. On account that I did not have a good life, young noble. The white-dressed youth then let out a long sigh of regret. I originally didn't have the intention of killing you, but since you have epilepsy, you wouldn't be able to have a good life anyway. If that's the case, there isn't any reason for you to be kept alive. I shall perform a good deed and send you along then. With a strong sense of humiliation, Zai Menguang almost wanted to let out a roar. However, his fear still took the upper hand and he began to plead instead, Young noble Ling, you are a benevolent senior and I have never provoked senior before. Senior, may you treat me like a fart and let me off easily. This old man is already in my old age, and I don't have many more years to live. The heavens will reward the kind, woo wah woo. At the very end, this third elder Ximen actually began bawling. Ling Tian was dumbfounded. What the FK? This is an elder of the Ximen family? Ling Tian spit and was filled with disdain. How frustrating. To think you are called Ximen Kuang. The world-famous Mr. Smart. Ling Tian could not help but feel depressed. Originally, he intended to come here for a massacre. However, he never imagined such a scenario would occur and that Ximen Kuang was actually such an individual. Ling Tian suddenly felt that killing such a person would be dirtying his hands. However, Ling Tian had no choice but to kill Ximen Kuang because of his mission and could not help but be extremely depressed. What is this? If I kill him, I will dirty my hands. If I don't, I will fail my mission. If I were to let this elder remain alive, it would definitely be a huge wild card for 30. For him to be all the way out here alone, I can't afford for anything to go wrong. As Ximen Kuang saw Ling Tian's face turning uglier and uglier by the second, his knees gave way from fear and they could no longer hold up his own body weight. With a putong sound, he knelt down on the ground as he trembled, "May young noble be benevolent and let me off." For the very first time in his life, Ling Tian fell into a dilemma. As for the other 20 people, their faces were all pale and not a single one of them dared to place their hand on the hilt of their sword. It was as though they were 20 pillars rooted to the ground with fear in their eyes. Not to mention fighting, they probably didn't even have the guts to move their legs in the slightest. Could they still be called men? Ling Tian finally gave out a sigh and waved his hands with a deflated attitude. "All of you cripple your cultivations. This young noble doesn't have the mood to touch any of you. Don't create any trouble for me." Ximen Kuang's body began to tremble with his face filled with despair. To a martial arts cultivator, losing his cultivation was no different from death. He just could not understand why Ling Tian wouldn't let him off despite him kneeling on the ground and pleading for his life. Ximen Kuang's lips trembled for a while and he pleaded, "I hope young noble will be benevolent. This old man is willing to cut off my arm to gain the chance to survive. This old man does not want to lose the martial arts that have accompanied me all my life during the final few years of my life. I hope young noble will fulfill my wish." Ling Tian waved his hands impatiently as he shouted, "Since I asked all of you to cripple your cultivation, hurry up and do so. Why are you guys still acting in such a wishy-washy manner? Do you really want me to take action personally?" Ximen Kuang continued to struggle. "Ling Tian, you are also a martial arts cultivator and should understand what it means to lose your cultivation. Why do you have to be so overbearing? If you show us some mercy, we will be able to meet each other happily again in the future. Why does young noble Ling have to be so overbearing and force us to our deaths?" Ling Tian could not help but feel disgust in his heart. At this moment, Ling Tian suddenly thought about the traitors in his previous life during the war against Japan. He could not help but be filled with disdain as he thought, such a BSD road. If he were to be born in that generation of my previous life, he would definitely be a traitor. How many people will be harmed because of him? Thinking about that, killing intent rose from his heart. As Ximen Kuang witnessed the rising killing intent from Ling Tian, he thought that Ling Tian was about to launch his attack and was overwhelmed with despair. Thus, he could not help but let out a roar, "I will fight you to the death. Woo wah woo." He then pounced forward and let out a palm strike. Ling Tian let out a sigh and sent out his own palm strike. A miserable shriek sounded. As Ling Tian traveled in the night sky, he felt a strange sense of frustration. Since the ancient times, there have been many different kinds of people. Some killed because of fear, some killed to the point they were numb to it, some got more excited as they killed, and some puked after killing someone. However, there was no one like Ling Tian who felt gloomy from killing someone. From the ancient times until now, Ling Tian would probably be the first and last one. Chapter 386, Ruining Ximen. Feeling that he had yet again created another extremely frustrating and depressing world record, Ling Tian accelerated to his maximum speed. He openly charged to the Ximen family. With such a frightening speed, Ling Tian's clothes created zhuzh sounds as he cut through the air. With a loud bang, the gigantic door of the Ximen family was smashed to smithereens by Ling Tian and a huge dust cloud was formed. Then, Ling Tian's body shot out like an arrow and dashed straight towards the middle courtyard where the family head, Ximen Wu Yi, was staying at. After his conversation with 30 today, Ling Tian had fully grasped the internal situation of the Ximen family and the locations of all their courtyards. Who is there? Stop! Assassin! Stop him! A loud commotion sounded from all directions and Ling Tian had already arrived at the entrance of Ximen Wu Yi's courtyard. With his palm imbued with inner qi, he blew away the whole roof of Ximen Wu Yi's house. The sound of someone cursing sounded and Ximen Wu Yi's figure appeared from within the dust cloud with his face ashen from anger. He then hollered with inner qi imbued within his voice, "What scoundrel dares to create trouble at my Ximen family? Report your name. Report your grandmother's name." With the frustration he felt in his heart, Ximen Wu Yi was the best target for him to vent his anger on. Seeing Ximen Wu Yi exit his courtyard, Ling Tian pounced forward and exchanged a few blows with him, with both of them tangling together in a minute tornado. With another loud bang, both of their palms met and their figures were separated. With the walls crumbling and a huge dust cloud rising, Ximen Wu Yi, who was still in midair, let out an appalled scream, "Ling Tian? You're Ling Tian?" Ling Tian's figure suddenly paused in midair and he began to spin like a top, actually changing his direction and dashing at Ximen Wu Yi again. With a cruel smile on his face, he said, "It is your young master indeed. Didn't you send many people to come and find me? Family head Ximen, I am now following your wishes and have appeared in front of you." After exchanging a few palm strikes with Ling Tian, Ximen Wu Yi felt his innards trembling and knew that he had suffered internal injuries. Just when he was still in shock, he saw Ling Tian dashing right in front of him and could not help but be frightened out of his wits. Ling Tian's movement techniques just went against common sense. While being blasted away from the force of their palm strikes, he was actually able to go against common sense and change his direction in midair. Such a movement technique was something that Ximen Wu Yi had never heard about before. Before the surprised Ximen Wu Yi could react, Ling Tian had already appeared in front of him. With his guard down, Ximen Wu Yi let out a roar and gathered all his inner qi, forcing his body to descend immediately. However, the forceful circulation of his inner qi worsened his injuries, and blood flowed down from the corners of his lips. Ling Tian's figure bent slightly in midair and he had also charged down with a cold and cruel expression. Around him, a wave of densely packed arrows shot towards him like a pack of locusts. As one of the 8 great families on the continent, the quality of their elite disciples was definitely without question, and their ability to react to a situation was shown at this moment. However, it was a pity that Ling Tian did not even place them in his sight. With a cold snort, his figure did not slow down in the slightest as his palms formed a circle in front of his chest. With a loud roar, his inner chi shot out in all directions and the incoming arrows were all sent back to where they came from. Miserable shrieks sounded from all around, and the disciples of the Ximen family all began rolling down from the rooftops with their blood shooting out in all directions. At the same time, Ling Tian's figure had also appeared in front of Ximen Wu Yi like a ghost. He raised up his right hand, forming a blade with his palm, and swung it down like a huge axe. With a mouthful of blood being spat out, Ximen Wu Yi sent out both his palms as he tried to make a retreat. With their palms colliding, another huge bang sounded and Ling Tian descended down like a devil, giving chase to Ximen Wu Yi. Ximen Wu Yi's figure was like a bottle gourd, rolling on the ground without the disposition of an expert left behind. After crashing through many walls, Ximen Wu Yi's body finally stopped rolling and he began coughing out mouthfuls of blood. Before he could even stand up, Ling Tian's white figure appeared in front of him again. At the same time, the nearest Ximen family expert was at least 50 feet away. If Ling Tian really wanted to take Ximen Wu Yi's life at this moment, even the immortals would not be able to save him. With one hand, Ling Tian picked up Ximen Wu Yi's shirt, and with his other hand, pa-pa-pa-pa sounds sounded in the courtyard. In just a short few moments, Ling Tian had already slapped Ximen Wu Yi over 10 times. Ximen Wu Yi's head flung around uncontrollably in Ling Tian's hands and his teeth were all sent flying with his mouth filled completely with blood. Ling Tian! Don't you dare harm my foster father! I will fight you to the death! A loud cry sounded and a brilliant sword light cut through the air. Ling 30 had arrived here in the nick of time. With a bang, Ling Tian struck Ximen Wu Yi's chest one last time and ruptured all of his meridians while preserving his life. With a loud laugh, Ling Tian said, "What a filial foster son! Since you want him so much, you can have him back." Raising Ximen Wu Yi's body up, Ling Tian threw the body over to Ling 30 like a basketball. Ling 30 was dashing forward with his sword at the moment, and seeing Ling Tian throw Ximen Wu Yi at him, he threw his sword aside and spread out his arms to catch the dying Ximen Wu Yi. The resulting force had sent him 5 steps back and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Ling Tian darted into the air as he sent a concealed eye signal to Ling 30. He then burst out laughing as his white figure disappeared into the night sky with an arrogant laugh. How can the Ximen family be worthy of being part of the 8 great families? Ha! Arrows and concealed weapons filled the sky and shot towards Ling Tian, but with a slight shake, Ling Tian's figure disappeared completely. It was as though he had become a part of the night sky without a trace left behind. The heavily injured Ximen Wu Yi gasped for air as he heard Ling Tian's parting words of insult. Those words had pierced right into his soul. The few hundred years of foundation passed down to him from his ancestors had declined in his hands. He felt his heart clench in heartache and spat out another mouthful of blood before losing his consciousness. The whole celestial gathering city was thrown into a mess. It was filled with soldiers carrying torches or the experts of the Ximen family searching the streets. With his anger vented and mission accomplished, Ling Tian had a bright smile on his face. Good martial arts. A voice sounded behind him. I never imagined that after not seeing you for a few days, you would have made such progress in your martial arts. How rare. Ling Tian was startled as he jumped up a pavilion before turning around to take a look. Justice was clad in green robes with his expression calm as he said with a pair of praising eyes, Ling Tian? In just a short few days, you have entered the realm of melding energy into spirit. The speed of your advancement can only be described as a miracle. Ling Tian, you are the greatest martial arts genius that I have ever seen. Your talents have even exceeded mine. No wonder you dared to say that you would defeat me in 10 years. Really? Ling Tian twitched his lips and said calmly, It is a pity that you won't give me the chance to grow to your strength or even exceed you. If not, when we both stand at the apex of martial arts and have an all-out fight, it would definitely be a battle recorded in the annals of history. It would definitely become a legend." Justice's face gleamed as a look of excitement shone in his eyes. After his initial shock, Ling Tian quickly regained his composure and immediately said the words most effective in dealing with justice. In this world, there might not be anything that Justice could be bothered with because he was already above all things. However, it was also because of that he felt a sense of loneliness. No matter how high his achievements were, there wouldn't be a second person who could admire the heights he had reached. It was just like if a person spent all of his effort to ascend to heaven only to realize that he was the only celestial. Apart from the initial satisfaction, the emotion that would follow would be endless loneliness. Furthermore, such a loneliness was not something that anyone could endure. At their realm, they could no longer be measured by common sense. They did not need someone to accompany them on their path. In fact, as long as they knew that there was someone else in the world like them who was just as lonely and walked the same path, it was enough to satisfy them. However, there wasn't anyone like that. The road to the peak was destined to be like the loneliness of the desolate autumn winds and the cheerless ice and snow. Now, there was a suitable character in front of him whose talent was enough to accompany him to the end. As long as he gave Ling Tian enough time, Ling Tian would definitely grow to a height capable of standing beside him. This was something that not only Ling Tian was confident about. Even Justice believed that. In fact, Justice believed that as long as he gave Ling Tian enough time, Ling Tian would definitely be able to surpass him one day. Right now, the choice lay in his hands. As long as he willed it, he would no longer be lonely in the world from now on. At the very least, he would no longer be lonely as he waited for Ling Tian to grow. However, Ling Tian's life was a request of the Martial Order Medallion. The Martial Order Medallion which had existed for 1,000 years. Beyond Heavens which had lasted for 1,000 years. The highest honor and glory. Generations of hard work and 1,000 years of persistence. Should he give him such time?
Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.